Hi all. We'll wait one more minute just to make sure that everyone gets to join, and then we'll begin. Hello, everyone. Happy to welcome you to another FHIR-IL community meeting. My name is Daniel Surujan. You probably know me from the FHIR product community and team. I am here today honored to have an external guest, who's Raghu Mudundi. Raghu is an IT director from the Cleavland Clinic, focusing on emerging markets and emerging solutions. As you know, the Cleavland Clinic is probably one of the world's leading providers, medical institutions in general, with a rich history of adopting new solutions, pushing the boundaries in order to provide better care. And today, we've asked Raghu to present us with the Cleavland Clinic FHIR adoption, the different reasons why they chose to adopt FHIR as a standard, a few use cases of how they actually use FHIR, some physician-facing, some patient-facing, and eventually to better understand the advantages of using FHIR from a provider point of view. Raghu, we have a few dozen of people here with me and a few connecting from home. They will see you on screen here. Again, a privilege and an honor to have you. And please go on.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Are you able to hear me okay? Okay, excellent. Well, good afternoon for all those folks in Israel, and it's bright and early in the morning here for me in Cleveland, US. I'm honored to be part of this presentation here to this elite gentlemen and ladies here on the quorum. So I want to get started in the interest of time. A little bit about myself. My name is Raghu Mudundi. I've been in healthcare IT for about 25 years now. I've been a developer in the past myself, and then moved up to leadership roles in the last 13 years or so. I've worked at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center first for 7 years, and then I've moved to work at Mayo Clinic for another 13 years before moving to Cleveland to work for Cleveland Clinic IT 5 years ago. So over 25 years of healthcare IT experience. A little bit about Cleavland Clinic. We have several locations across the United States, and we have recently opened a hospital in London, a clinic and a hospital in London. We have some presence in Canada with Sports Health. We have here in the US, we are in Nevada, Florida. Our base is in Ohio, where we have the major hospitals and hospital system here in Ohio and around Ohio. And then we also have a huge presence in Abu Dhabi as well. Here are some stats that were published in 2021 with number of locations, outpatient locations, hospitals, beds worldwide, number of patients we took care of, a number of caregivers. Little bit about FHIR. You probably all are aware of these FHIR concepts, but FHIR in general, a solid way of data exchange, basically a good standard for interoperability between healthcare systems. And then came Smart on FHIR, which provides better mechanism for integrating with EHRs. Like using FHIR, we pull the data using FHIR APIs in a common standard, and then we integrate with the EHRs using Smart on FHIR, which provides authorization and integration with the EHRs. Here is a quick slide. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but high level, the architecture that we use for APIs here at the clinic. And wherever you see CCF being referred to, it's Cleavland Clinic Foundation. So it's just a short form of Cleavland Clinic. So you would hear me reference CCF in slides from in the future slides here. So as you can see, we have all these applications that use APIs basically to pull and push data from an EMR. And all these APIs, we broker them through our API management solution, which is Google Apigee. And then some of our APIs take the custom CSL path, which is our custom API layer that we have built. And then ultimately the data gets pulled and pushed, from the databases at the bottom. We also have a Rhapsody engine, that provides some API access to the Epic APIs. And while I'm going through these slides, if any of you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. I'll try to be precise with my answers so I can get through all the slides and probably give you some time toward the end for any Q&A sessions. So a little bit about the CCF integration engines. So as I said, we have what we call the common service layer, which is a homegrown API layer that we started work on in 2014. And we're still maintaining the custom API layer, but we're not expanding the use of custom API layer because of the introduction of FHIR and FHIR standards. But this is a homegrown solution that's been in place since 2014. And it supports both internal and external integrations, internal meaning internal to CCF, and external integrations meaning those integrations that are external to CCF. And we have some custom designed APIs, and for some we provide wrappers to Epic APIs. We also provide API consolidation, where a single API call would result in multiple API calls behind the scenes, to consolidate the data and present the data as one response. And at that time, we used basic authentication, token-based authentication, because we didn't really have the OAuth technology at that time, or at least we didn't adopt OAuth for the custom service layer. It was just basic authentication. And we've also done some request response manipulation, because the data that we used to get out of Epic was just old school SOAP APIs. So some of the integration requests that we were receiving were FHIR APIs, and we knew at that time that FHIR was going to catch popularity quickly. So we did have some APIs where we were changing the response or manipulating the response to transform it into a FHIR response for consumption by our integration partners. And as I said, we also have a pass-through for Rhapsody Engine. There are some integrations that are going through Rhapsody Engine. We're trying to minimize the use of Rhapsody Engine. And over the last 2 years, the shift in the industry has been to standard, using the standard that Epic EMRs provide, EMRs such as Epic or Cerner provide, and not to use custom layers, because the EMRs themselves have provision, standard-based integrations. And here is a quick journey of our FHIR here at the clinic. So 2016, 2017, that's when CCF designed the first FHIR APIs using the common custom API layer. So we used our API layer to transform normal APIs to FHIR APIs. And we started our first integration using custom API layer with Oscar scheduling. I'm going to share a bit more information about Oscar scheduling in a bit. Epic did launch FHIR APIs with OAuth authentication around 2017. Epic is our EMR that we use here at the clinic. And we've been on Epic since early 2000s. I think 2004, 2005 is when we have gone live with Epic. And at that time, CCF, the FHIR APIs were not available for CCF, so we were continuing to use our custom API layer for FHIR APIs. But in 2018, CCF upgraded to an Epic version that has provisioned FHIR APIs. So we quickly published a FHIR endpoint for meaningful use, where our government mandated that we should freely share health information for anyone and everyone, including patients or developers or whoever wants to pull data using an app, using an API. We have to open up all our APIs. And Epic has provisioned a way for us to open up our data through APIs by providing the standard FHIR endpoint that we published on open.epic. So external developers are able to build applications. And as soon as we completed providing that FHIR endpoint, the standard FHIR endpoint for Cleveland Clinic, we integrated with Apple Health. So that was one of our first integrations that we worked on as soon as we got the standard FHIR endpoint out in the market. And since then, like 2020 through 2022, we have seen Smart on FHIR mature. So this is the functionality that the EMRs offer to integrate with external applications or external partners. So developers build applications that integrate with the application itself, like MyChart for patients or Hyperspace for providers. And we started working on Smart on FHIR integrations using the standard CCF FHIR endpoint, and this has become our de facto standard now. With all the integrations, that we deal with are through the standard FHIR endpoint, and as a Smart on FHIR integration. Some are Smart on FHIR integrations, and some are not. So those that integrate directly with the applications that the physicians and patients use, those are Smart on FHIR integrations, but you don't have to design it that way. You can just have a standalone application and not integrate with the EMR directly. And since then, we have seen exponential increase of marketplace apps and the developer community. So in my experience over the last couple of years, we've seen a significant growth in the number of requests that we've been receiving through our community to integrate some of those apps that have been in the Epic marketplace, we have supported those integrations. So we've been actively working on those integrations over the last year or so, year and a half. So we feel that there's an exponential increase in the developer community building applications and the healthcare providers adopting to the apps that are in the marketplace. And we've also seen a growth in the number of applications that are in the marketplace as well. Initially, like 2.5 years ago, we probably had like handful apps, like 10, 15 apps. I don't know, I don't have a count of the number of apps that we have in the marketplace now, but it's quite a few. You see a large list of apps there. And here are some API stats at Cleavland Clinic. Just in the last 12 months, there are about 2 billion API calls that were used by all the internal and external integrations. 800 million of them have been FHIR APIs, and 1.2 billion have been non-FHIR APIs. Again, we have several apps, both internal and external. As you can see, within the FHIR category, we have 70% of the calls coming from Apple Health, which is the health app by Apple on iPhones. And then 25% is from Oscar, which is the Oscar scheduling app. And I'm going to review these two solutions a bit on how we implemented them, and then share a bit more information about the functionality of these two apps. And then the other 1.2 billion, again, those are apps that are integrated through Hyperspace. Those are custom solutions at the clinic that we have built over the last 5 to 6 years. Here's a quick slide on the FHIR integrations. As I said, Apple Health takes 70% of that share. And then it's just a quick pie chart of the different FHIR integrations that we have. This is not the entire list, but I just picked the most important ones. And this is the slide on the non-FHIR integrations. Again, the various, most of these are internal CCF built applications that we support here in-house. Just a quick slide on how we start with these FHIR integrations. For any application that one has to build, the first thing that they need to have is a key to be able to call the APIs in an EMR. And the way the key is established, the key is this little string that uniquely identifies an application. So the way one gets the key is either through open.epic, which is that open marketplace, open developer community where any developer can go to open.epic and start building an app. So you can get an app through a key through open.epic, or Epic also has a marketplace. They've recently changed the name from App Orchard to App Market. So there is a marketplace solution by Epic where developers are able to not just build applications, but they're also able to promote their applications in the marketplace. With open.epic, there is no real promotion that you could do, but with App Orchard, you can publish your app and promote your app for use by other healthcare institutions. And then the third way we do it is we go through App Orchard and then we create an internal app. So if you want to build an app that is only going to be used by Cleavland Clinic, and if Cleavland Clinic owns the IP for it, we are able to get a client ID or a key, defining it as an internal app. Once we get the key, that's when we start building the solution using FHIR, using the standards. Now I'm going to quickly review Apple Health integration and Oscar scheduling and give you a bit more information on the other applications that we have integrated. Just wanted to pause here to see if any of you have any questions that I'm able to answer. Yeah, I'll try to get through some of these slides, and hopefully, we'll have some time toward the end for some question and answers. Yeah, so with Apple Health integration, as I stated, we have set up the standard FHIR endpoint in 2018, and immediately, we had Apple Health that we integrated, and the whole process took us less than 2 weeks. I should say like week for testing and another like half a week for implementation. So it was pretty quick that once we had the FHIR endpoint published, we received some a template document from Apple as to we had to provide our FHIR endpoint and some basic information about Cleavland Clinic, and they were able to quickly set up the integration within no time. And we had a test patient in production with all the data that we were able to quickly open our phone and access the data for the test patient. So just because it's build once, deploy as many places as you want type of integration, they were able to quickly work with us to get the integration up and running within 2 weeks. And from the patient standpoint, they access health information from the health app on their iPhones. They select Cleavland Clinic as a health system, and they authorize once with their MyChart account, and then the data gets pulled into the iPhone for use by patients. And here's some screenshots of how that looks. So you have the Apple Health on your phone, and once you open, you do an ad account, and then you pick Cleavland Clinic, and it launches the MyChart login screen. And this is the OAuth functionality that I was referring to for authorization, where external apps can pop up, the login screen for MyChart for patients, or the Hyperspace login screen for providers. So we are able to get the authentication. And once authenticated, you can pick, sometimes a patient might have multiple profiles, one for themselves and one for their grandparents or for their children. You can pick which you want to authorize to pull data into the phone. And then you can also allow access to different data sets, and you can pick and choose which data sets you want to pull. You can give access to just lab test results and immunizations, and not give access to other entities. And Apple Health would only be able to pull those entities that you give access to. And you can also define how long you can give access, meaning that after, let's say, I pick 1 month, and if I go back into my app after 1 month, it would ask me to log in using my MyChart credentials. And so you can specify how long you want to maintain access. And then once you add the account, it's added. And then once the account is added, you're able to pull all the data, like allergies, vitals, medical conditions, immunizations, lab results, medications, procedures, and all these data sets are pulled using FHIR API calls, going through that standard FHIR endpoint that I was referring to. And then you pick and choose a category, and you're able to see all the data, the health data there. And then if you choose to remove the connection to your Apple phone, you can go into the account, and then you can remove source. select Cleavland Clinic and remove source. And likewise, if you have accounts with multiple health systems, you're able to specify, which health system you want to pull the data from, and you're able to add, remove connection to those health systems. And here's a quick stats for the APIs that are used by Apple Health. As you can see, the observation is the highest, 86%, and then followed by medication, patient, diagnostic report. So it's mostly all the observations that are being pulled through FHIR APIs. So this is another integration where we have partnered with the insurance company to provide an insurance, as a healthcare provider, working with an external insurance company to brand a new insurance called Cleveland Clinic plus Oscar Health Insurance. And Oscar was gaining strength, in some of the markets here at US. So we started this as a joint partnership in the Cleveland area first, where we had worked with the Oscar IT team to integrate their systems with our systems. And when we did this work, we didn't have the standard integration through Epic. So we had to use our own custom API layer to transform normal APIs to FHIR APIs, and work with the Oscar IT to provision these APIs for them to pull all the data that they needed for this integration. And here is a quick slide on how we went about building this integration. So Oscar already had some mobile apps, web apps, and some backend infrastructure where they have integrated with other health systems, and which is all FHIR-based integrations. And Oscar came to us and said, hey, we need FHIR APIs to be able to integrate with Cleveland Clinic, to be able to search for patients, search for open slots, book appointments, and do all the self-scheduling from their mobile app for their members who are CCF patients. So for that integration, we had to support a variety of technologies here. As you can see, for some, we have used FHIR APIs. And for the provider roster, we had to use a file SFTP because of some limitations with the systems that we had. We couldn't provide a FHIR API-based solution. So we had to go with the SFTP solution for sharing the provider roster. And for appointment slots, sharing the availability for all the providers, we gave them FHIR APIs through our custom API layer. And then the actual appointment scheduling, canceling, that's all. Those are all FHIR APIs again. All patients have to select a primary care physician here, and that was also a FHIR API. And there was some behind the scenes scheduling sync that needs to happen between the CCF scheduling, the CCF schedules and Oscar schedules for a given patient, because the schedules were in two systems and they had to be in sync. So the sync from Oscar to Cleveland Clinic used to happen through FHIR APIs, and the sync on the reverse between CCF and Oscar used to happen through HL7 as a backend integration. So we used to trigger a HL7 message, converting it to a FHIR on the backend, and Oscar gets the message whenever a patient's schedule changes, whenever their appointment gets canceled or created or updated. And here's some screens of the PCP selection and enrollment and scheduling. So these are all screens from Oscar application, where the provided self-scheduling for their members who are CCF patients again. And here are links to the marketplace. So, I mean, I only put links for the two major EMR providers here in the US, Epic being having the major market share, and then Cerner being the next one. So I've provided links to each of those marketplaces. So if you are interested to take a peek at what sort of applications are being built and published to these marketplaces, you can go to these links and you should be able to browse through the apps and see what kind of apps are being built and consumed by different healthcare providers. And here is a slide on recent apps that we have supported. And these are all integrations that go through the standard process of getting a key from App Orchard and working with internal teams to integrate the application with our Hyperspace, which is the Epic user interface, Epic application that's used by the providers, or integrating with MyChart, which is the patient portal for health. So again, I'm not going to go through all these in detail because I myself, I don't have much information about these apps. So the way these apps get integrated is myself and my team being the App Orchard point persons, we get a request through App Orchard saying that someone is interested in an app. And all we have to do is we have to go into the App Store to download the keys to our EMR. And then the project teams work on the integration. So we provide our FHIR endpoint, the standard FHIR endpoint, and that FHIR endpoint gets configured within Epic and the external application that's being integrated with our Epic. And there is some configuration that goes into each of these that is very basic configuration. So I've seen some of these apps getting set up in a matter of a month or less than a month, especially those apps that have more coordination to be done by various teams. I mean, those could take up to a month, but I've seen some integrations just completed in 2 weeks because it's mostly all configuration work and there's nothing to be built because the integration itself is built using standards. So it's easily implemented at new health systems. So Pacemate Live, ePath Logic, Unite Us are some of the recent integrations that we supported. Again, the integration knowledge of what each of these applications do is with the teams that support these integrations. I mean, those are other teams here at the clinic. My team just provided the keys and the FHIR endpoint URL. So these are the provider-facing applications. We also have a telemedicine initiative, a CCF homegrown solution. We call CMU, that stands for Central Monitoring Unit. It's a remote secondary monitoring service that we provide with cardiac monitoring techs sitting in a room that are able to monitor any patient that's hooked up to telemetry at the bedside. We get all the data into a central location where the cardiac monitoring techs are able to monitor 24/7, 365. So they're continuously providing these monitoring services. And this is a homegrown solution that we have built here at the clinic over 8 years ago. And that's all being built using custom APIs and using our custom API layer. And we found that we had the opportunity to move that custom solution into standards, or at least using some standards with Epic FHIR APIs. So we've recently invested time and resources to move away from the custom APIs that we've been using for a long time to using standard Epic FHIR APIs. And then the entire system is deployed on-prem, and we are looking at moving that to Azure Cloud. So we wanted to deploy the application and all the processing in Azure Cloud. And the one thing that I wanted to share with this integration, again, this is work in progress. So we've started earlier this year to build this application or in a standard way. And we hope to complete this by mid next year. And what we found out is that when we brought in new developers, they didn't have to have a lot of healthcare knowledge or skills in healthcare IT because they were already versed with the OAuth concept, or which is not healthcare specific. It's used in all other industries as well. And the APIs that return data, FHIR APIs, they're JSON formatted. So the developers found it pretty easy to adapt to building healthcare IT applications. So the two developers that we have, they did not have any prior knowledge of healthcare, but they were able to quickly pick up knowledge, basic healthcare knowledge, and use that to build the applications and consume the APIs. So it's been a very smooth transition for the developers. Just because the data that's being returned is in standard format, and we're using standard integrations. Yeah, that is the last slide that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Again, my apologies. I was going a bit fast with all these slides because there was a lot to cover, but I'm able to set some time at the end here to answer any questions you might have for me.
So first of all, thank you very much for that presentation. A real eye-opener and interesting to see how, again, you as a provider integrate new systems. I'll start. I have a few questions, and then I'll let the people here ask a few more. First of all, as an IT director in such a big hospital, to what extent do you feel adopting FHIR as a standard made the whole process of new integrations more efficient throughout time? Was it something that happened immediately? How far into the process did it become more efficient to create new integrations?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel. So in my experience, as I stated, like when we started building Oscar Health, scheduling integration, it was not easy because we didn't really have FHIR APIs, and we had to do a lot of custom work to provision those FHIR APIs to external partners, and so it was a lot of work. But again, even that work was a bit easier because we had to adopt standards, and the developers picked up the standards quickly. When I mean standards, the FHIR formats, and they were able to consume existing services and transform those into FHIR APIs. So the whole Oscar scheduling took us about 6 months, I should say. The core of the work was done in like 4.5 months, and we completed most of the integration in 6 months. So that's still a pretty quick turnaround time. So I would say, I think it was a bit tough in the beginning, but especially once we have the standard that came out of Epic, where Epic provided FHIR APIs, and Epic provided a way for OAuth and smart on FHIR integrations, it has become rather easy for my teams from an IT integration standpoint, because we didn't have to, like, for example, like the last 3 that we worked on, we didn't have any IT teams actually working on the actual build of this. It's mostly a couple of Epic teams doing some configuration work in Epic, and the integration is live. So I would say I mean, just because we have standard-based integration, Smart on FHIR, OAuth, FHIR APIs, it's become really easy for us to support these new integrations because there's pretty much no work for us to do with these integrations other than picking the app from the app market and pushing the keys down to the EMR. I hope that answered your question, Daniel.
Yes, it did. It did. Thank you. And in terms of other aspects which you feel that adopting FHIR created some kind of a business advantage for Cleveland Clinic, other than making the IT integrations more efficient, do you think it somehow helped other business aspects?
Yeah, I think, as I said, over the last 2 years, I've seen exponential growth with the number of apps that were built in, number of apps that were published in the marketplace. I see they've like increased from a handful just 2 years ago to hundreds just 2 years later. And I see a lot of development, like solution development, integrating with the EMRs, just because of these standards, because I wouldn't have envisioned so many different, I mean, like a community of healthcare apps in the past, you know, without the standards and the few standards that we had in healthcare. I haven't seen a lot of healthcare app development in the past. But over the last 2 years, I just see a lot of developers building applications and deploying to the marketplace. So that's from the community standpoint, where we see a huge increase in companies and developers that are building applications. And on the healthcare side, like from the provider standpoint, again, I mean, there are a lot of solutions. I'm sure there are a lot of solutions that are in the marketplace that we haven't even looked at. What I would think is, you know, as on the clinic side, we really have to look at, we would have to invest some time and resources to look through all the applications that we have in the marketplace to see which ones really enhance the workflows of the physician and try and integrate those apps with our EMR for our clinicians. And that's the part that we haven't done so far. Just because we came out of COVID with a different set of priorities, and we haven't really started adopting those applications that are already in the marketplace. I think that is something that we will be looking at over the next couple of years, perhaps, once we have resources to look through the apps and start integrating those for the physicians.
So one last question from me, and then we'll open it to the rest of the audience. Here today in the audience, both present and online, we have a few key opinion leaders in the Israeli healthcare market, representing both hospitals, community health, and other players in the healthcare ecosystem. And we are about, I'd say, 3 years back in terms of the Israeli adoption of the FHIR standard. And we have a lot to learn from the American partners we have, and specifically from Cleveland Clinic. If you had 2, 3 specific words of advice to a hospital in Israel, an HMO in Israel, creating its, taking the first steps of creating the FHIR architecture and FHIR integrations, what would the 2 best advices be?
Yeah, so again, what I would advise is, I mean, FHIR, I mean, especially for healthcare integrations, I mean, FHIR is the standard moving forward, and it's gaining adoption, like not just on the healthcare side, but on the payer side too. Here in the U.S., and we see FHIR being adopted by all players in healthcare market, not just the hospitals, but providers and patients. So if I mean, it's guaranteed that you have to at some point adopt FHIR and see the integrations grow with FHIR adoption. And I would say it's going to take some time to adopt FHIR. And what has made it easier for Cleavland Clinic is with Epic providing the platform for FHIR integrations, because they have built all the behind the scenes authorizations, authorization mechanism through OAuth, and they provided a marketplace and a way for us to build the FHIR endpoint so that we can publish the FHIR endpoint once and enable all the integration. So that is something that has to be figured out. Again, I myself have not been part of the technology on providing the standard platform in Epic, but I think that has really given us a huge boost with Epic providing that platform for integrations. And of course, I think if there is no platform for you, I think there will be, I would say you'd have to invest time and resources in building the platform. But once the platform is built, then the integrations would happen quickly. As I said, like any of the integrations that we have started since 2018, once we have the standard platform, all the integrations have been like quick configurations and no actual development or build involved. But the platform is the key.
Thank you. Any questions from our online audience?
Hi, I have a quick question. This is Amir from Abelink. We are system integrators building FHIR solutions and integrations. My question is specifically regarding the use case that you have mentioned in the Oscar CCF integration. The last use case that you mentioned is around appointment status sync, the HL7 to FHIR use case. So the first question is if you could reiterate on what was exactly the requirement there. And the second question is around the implementation of this requirement. I guess that there is an ongoing project in HL7 that maps between HL7 and FHIR. So my question is, how much have you relied, have Cleavland Clinic relied on the public project, and how much extra customization did it took to get it working? Thank you.
Yeah, sure, man. So with the Oscar scheduling, especially with the appointment status sync, so here basically patients who are Oscar insurance members, they have an application that Oscar provided, mobile app, web app for self-scheduling. So they were able to schedule appointments using their app, and they also maintain those schedules within the Oscar system. Now that the appointments that get scheduled through that app, of course, do get registered in our Epic instance. So when an appointment is scheduled for a provider with the provider, that appointment is scheduled and stored within our Epic system. But that appointment could change, with through our EMR, like a scheduler going in and updating the appointment, changing the date, because the patient could call, instead of going through the desk, they might call one of our schedulers to change the appointment. And that change would have to register back in Oscar system. So the only way we could do that is, we have our HL7 backend integration engine. So it's an event-based approach where when we have a change in status of an appointment, that status is relayed back to Oscar through the backend HL7 engine as an event-based integration. And instead of sending a HL7 message into Oscar, we have, again, I don't deal much with the HL7 integration engine, but the developers figured out a way to transform the HL7 message into a JSON FHIR format. So before sending the HL7 message, they transform the HL7 message into a FHIR message and post it to a FHIR endpoint that Oscar provided to us. So that way, they're just consuming, JSON payloads and don't have to deal with HL7 messages. I hope that answers your question, Amir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
I have an additional question related to the Oscar integration. My name is Lior. I'm from Cordio Medical. My question here is the patient enrollment in this kind of cases is using the hospital credentials in order to sign into the third-party application to the Oscar?
Yeah, Lior, that's a great question. So no, they're not using the hospital credentials here. So all the authentication happens, on the Oscar side, because those patients being an Oscar member, they're all authenticated on the Oscar system, and yeah, I think they maintain that authentication, and that doesn't transform into their authentication within Epic. So they have their own authentication scheme there. All the APIs behind the scenes, those are using basic authentication, token-based authentication that we have built in our custom API layer, and the API interaction happens between their system and our system. Some APIs get called when the patients are scheduling appointments, selecting PCPs and within the application, and some are backend APIs where when they're looking for availability of provider slots for scheduling, for those they're constantly polling every half hour for open slots. So yeah, so they're basically calling APIs from their backend using basic authentication again to pull open slots to present to their members.
And is there any use case that you are using Smart on FHIR and OAuth?
With the Oscar integration, I would say no, because this is something that we have built before Epic provided the standard platform. So there isn't any Smart on FHIR involved, with the Oscar CCF integration. But the other integrations that I was referring to, like the Apple Health, where you have the patient signing in using their MyChart credentials.
Yeah.
So that's Smart on FHIR. Yeah. And then some of these integrations toward the end, where I refer to, the provider-facing integrations. Again, I don't remember which ones are launching within the EMR versus which ones are launching standalone. But I would think definitely Unitas, I think, is Smart on FHIR, where we the providers when they open. They're in Hyperspace, which is the application that Epic provides for providers. And when they launch into Unite Us, it paints within the Epic application as a Smart on FHIR integration, where we send the context to Unite Us without the provider needing to log in again, because they're already logged in. We know the context. We pass that context onto Unite Us platform when they launch their web app within Hyperspace.
Okay, thank you.
Two small questions. Hello?
Hey, Sagib, we have time for one last question. Go ahead.
Okay, so quick one is, how adaptable is this system when it comes to adding new fields, new types of data?
Is that question specific to Oscar or just other integrations in general?
No, it's generic question. So new fields keep coming, maybe specific data for next generation sequencing or something else needs to be shared, for example.
Yeah, so I think that all depends on the integration, because as the IT team that is supporting the integrations, we don't really have to do anything on our end. It's mostly going to be the developer who's building the integration, depending on what those changes are. They would have to build that within the integration that they're supporting. I don't know if I answered your question right here, sorry, but I feel like it's more like how the solution needs to be enhanced to add those additional features. And if those data sets are FHIR enabled, I'm pretty sure that's going to be an easy integration with pulling those data entities into the integration. If not, it might be a bit tougher to pull that data.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah,
It's a short one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So hi, I'm Anat from Cordio Medical as well. I was wondering from your point of view, there are many applications are integrated with the EMR, and what are you doing with all the data for now? What kind of usage do you do? The physician are using the data? Do you integrate the data? They're becoming many sources of data when you integrate it to so many applications. There might be overlapping of the same data from various sources. So how do you solve that kind of problem?
Yeah, great question, Anat. I think again it depends on the integration, because I see some of these integrations they're filing data straight back into Epic, right? So the provider launches the screen again. Sorry, I don't have specific examples to share with you, but in general, depending on what the integration is doing, the integration could store data back in Epic on the patient's chart. Sometimes the data is stored in an external system and filed back into Epic through an interface, through a backend interface. For example, like the patient receives some instructions. They go through the instructions, they get filed in the external system, and that gets sent back as a PDF into Epic to their file.
But what happens if you have like the same data for multiple applications? For example, vital signs, you can receive them from one application and from another application at the same time.
Yeah, so I don't know if there are any scenarios where we are receiving the same data. Well, yeah, we do have integrations through what we call Validate, which is a remote patient monitoring system. And that one, yes, the patient could have multiple accounts, and they might be sending the same data sets from multiple accounts, and those all get filed as discrete data on the patient's chart. So it doesn't really matter which integration it's coming from, as long as the data is filed in in the right format.
Okay.
Raghu, thank you very much. Thank you for all the people who asked questions. The fact that most of the questions were startup people and less HMO and hospital teams is interesting in its own. Raghu, thank you very much for this lecture, for the time, for the Q&A. It's awesome, and I'm sure we would love to keep on having this the ability to ask you questions down the road as a FHIR community here in Israel, as a developing FHIR community here in Israel. So again, thank you very much. It's an honor, and good luck on the upgrade. I know you have a big upgrade today.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, and thank you, everyone. And it's a pleasure speaking in front of you, and really happy that I'm able to share this information. And hoping that it was helpful for you all. And as Daniel said, if you have additional questions, feel free to send them to Daniel, and I can help answer those.
Thank you very much. We'll be sure to send you a few more questions. Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you.
all.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.